Hello, welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Ken Wood, who's EVP of Product Management at Descartes System Group. And today we're going to talk about the final mile in food logistics. So food, it's a basic necessity, whether you're consuming it at a restaurant, buying it at a grocery store, or, getting it at a food bank. The logistics behind the food industry is critical. It's arguably more critical than ever. And as with all industries, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the food industry, causing both challenges as well as opportunities. So what changes is the industry facing today? And how are companies innovating their food logistics processes? And how is technology helping? Well, those are the main questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have Ken on the program to share his insights and advice on this topic. So Ken, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Adrian. It's good to see you again. I appreciate you having me on to talk about final mile and food logistics.
Absolutely. Well, Ken, you and I have known each other for for a long time. And in fact, in preparation for today's episode, we were kind of reminiscing a little bit about you were one of the original members of my logistics leaders for Type 1 diabetes cure cycling team back in 2016 in Death Valley. But surprisingly, you're a first-time guest on Talking Logistics. So just to, like I always like to do when people come on the program for the first time, and just for the benefit of our audience, I'm always curious how people get involved in the industry. And, so maybe, you can briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Descartes.
It was all very strategic and pre-planned to arrive in the chair today. I got hired into a job way back in the day by a professor I had at Georgia Tech, who, as so many, had the technology business outside of the professorial gig, and really didn't know what I was getting into. But it was about operations research and a lot of early supply chain technology. At the time, and we were doing things like some of the early routing and scheduling platforms that were desktop based, moving from DOS to Windows way back in the day, and some of the early supply chain network design technology that was in the market, and that evolved over time from being in consulting and development roles and things like that over time in various organizations into joining Descartes back in the early 2000s, and working my way through to again R&D and other positions into product management now, where we are responsible for worrying about the roadmap and the product strategy, and working with both customers and the internal stakeholders on trying to read market tea leaves and respond to customer demands to figure out what we're going to build and when we're going to build it.
Great. Well, certainly, a lot has changed since you got started in the industry back in those days, coming out of Georgia Tech. And a lot has changed, not only on the technology side of things, which you've got a strong pulse on, but obviously on, what's happening with business processes and just the broader market in general. And again, food logistics is one of those areas where, certainly has seen a lot of change. Now, maybe as a way to get started, I mean, food logistics is a, kind of a very broad, term. I mean, what are some of the different categories or industries that fall under that umbrella term?
Yeah, if you were to, speaking from, our direct experience and my experience historically, you see different kinds of customers, businesses in our case that we work with, that cover things like broadline food supply, where you're going to institutions, right? It could be care homes, it could be schools, it could be other types of institutional settings where you're delivering, a broad array of food products and ancillary products that go along with food preparation into those institutional supplies of restaurants, right? Restaurant supply would be usually a similar type of business, or a division of a similar type of business for our customers. And if you think about what that means for those businesses historically, and we'll talk about how things are potentially changing a little bit, but what that's mean for those types of businesses, as patterns and predictability of order fulfillment has historically been very important for those businesses, right? Line up the deliveries in the plan, and depending on the scale of their demand and the kind of things that they're ordering, maybe they need to be visited once, twice, 3 times a week, every other week, that kind of a pattern. Another example would be grocery supply and grocery wholesale, right? Completely different business. You're dealing with large quantities to a store or two being delivered in many cases, right? And there's some exceptions to that, but generally you're dealing with truckloads that are going into a handful of locations with a reduced set of commodities. And then you see retail snack and beverage, right? And in some cases, those could be driver merchandised, independent merchandiser attended, right? So, or it could be store shelf stock where you're delivering to just the back room, so to speak. But again, a completely different type of business, usually a very narrow range of commodities compared to grocery or restaurant broadline institutional supply. In some cases you're delivering to gas stations, convenience stores. Some of them could be delivering supplemental product if they're in beer and certain beverages beyond what the broadline folks might be delivering into restaurant. And then there's this new phenomenon of e-commerce oriented B2C food, or food like product deliveries, convenience store deliveries, and prepared meal deliveries and things like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think certainly, like I said, a very broad range of industries, and when you get down to the specifics of the logistics behind those, very different constraints and customer service requirements and distribution models and so forth. And obviously they've all been impacted, in some ways over the past, 20 months. So how specifically, I mean, has the COVID-19 pandemic and kind of all the ripple effects over the past 20 months impacted your customers in the food industry?
Well, it's been an unfolding story. As we've entered different phases of the response to COVID-19 and the varying waves of lockdowns and things like that geographically. I think in the early days, particularly for the restaurant supply oriented businesses, it was looking at like an immediate collapse, right? Restaurants were closed, right? And they're scrambling to try and figure out what are we going to do in order to stay in business in some cases, and keep they have a lot of product in warehouses and in freezers. At the same time, you had the phenomenon where the shutdown in restaurant and dine out caused a spike in grocery, right? And you recall the time frame where we were talking about the first wave of shelves being empty in grocery stores for high demand commodities. And there was a lot of discussion with our customers around their ability to shift certain commodities into grocery supply and away from restaurant supply, and supplement the institution. And that started, I would say, a little bit of a chain reaction from a technology standpoint, because businesses that had been so oriented around those recurring patterns of stable business that I was talking about earlier are all of a sudden thinking more like a business that requires dynamic routing and dynamic delivery planning to visit people that they haven't visited before and may not visit again in some of these scenarios for on an order basis instead of a delivery pattern basis.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it was feast or famine, right? And I think there were and in both cases presented its own challenges, right? One was about survival, and one was about how we're going to manage this spike in demand as efficiently as possible.
It was and it was I'd say it was like so many other things related to e-commerce. It was a bit of a catalyst moment for fence sitters and experimenters for home delivery of groceries to really ramp up their marketing and level of commitment efforts to partner with, if they needed technology, to get that technology, if they needed actual delivery partners in the, in the industry, the usual names that are already out there delivering grocery or food to homes, to really solidify their plans to supplement fleet operations or other things with those kinds of third party providers. And I'd say our most our most recent observation around this is, as things have come back, and we're dealing with, the other thing we all read about is shortages of human capital in logistics, and this is affecting food final mile business as well, where there's a lot of emphasis now on driver attraction and retention. And for our business, we aren't necessarily at the forefront of issues associated with driver retention, but certainly you want your technology to be something that makes the driver's life easier and facilitates the quality of their in-cab experience, and not be detrimental to it as a part of attracting and retaining drivers in the marketplace. That's a big area of focus out there right now for customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can't lose sight of the fact that the drivers and the people remain a critical piece of this whole puzzle here. So in light of everything you just talked about, I mean, has this led to business model changes in food distribution?
Yeah, and some, to a certain extent, I don't think we'll ever go back exactly to the way things were before, even as restaurants start to open up and businesses stabilize a little bit. Although I think the whole supply chain kind of whiplash that's taken place and some of the supply issues and labor things we're talking about, it's not back to exact normal. But a lot of businesses have been recovering just from an absolute volume standpoint in the space where they had a downturn. Others are still rocketing if they're in some of those other segments that we were talking about. But I'd say all in all, it's kind of changed the focus across the board to say, well, maybe there are more opportunities for us to be more dynamic than we were before, right? And have more delivery models. That for some time, we've had appointment-based reservations type of solutions for B2C e-commerce delivery, and in certain cases B2B ad hoc deliveries, and starting to supplement or replace certain of those scheduled delivery plans oriented routes with the ability to do more ad hoc on-demand work, provide more flexibility to the customer, maybe take more advantage of the days or weeks order scenario with the assets that are on hand, instead of strictly working against a fixed delivery plan, or all things that have been discussed and implemented in some cases with customers in the final mile logistics space. And the other thing that I would say is, as we have seen, there's capacity problems all over the supply chain, right? That accounts for over the road freight, and on the inbound side of certain food businesses, the desire to look at the assets that are in place for outbound deliveries, if they're the right kind of asset. Obviously, you're not going to do this with a B2C delivery asset, but when you have that B2B delivery asset, to take a closer look at what are my opportunities to capture some of that inbound freight on trucks that I have, instead of struggling to find capacity and maybe paying extremely high over the road rates.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the things that's been a constant in transportation historically there's a lot of waste and inefficiency, overall, and underutilization of assets is one of those things. So to your point, I think the ability to look at opportunities to leverage the existing assets that you have more effectively, I think is important. And I think that's that can be viewed as one type of innovation, if you will. Well, what other types of innovation are happening in food logistics that you see?
Well, one of the things that, and this follows some other industry trends, but the conversion from on-premise and desktop-oriented systems has been proceeding apace into the cloud. Right, SaaS solutions as a part of this, evaluating how do I get more dynamic. That impacts a lot of things. It impacts what the driver has in their hands from a solution standpoint. It impacts how the routes get constructed and the dispatching processes happen. And it in particular impacts the kind of communications that you need to provide and the transparency and visibility to the customer, right? So if you're going to move from a model where you're there every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Roughly, to a model where we'll schedule it on an as needed basis, then the onus increases to provide that visibility to the customer on how you're doing, what the expectations are, providing ETA updates. As the businesses have become more dynamic, some of the things that have been, I think, rising to the fore here as well is, our solutions like machine learning technologies, right? So that you can crunch the numbers more systematically and more effectively related to how you're performing on transit times and in-service times, and understanding your labor. You're accommodating things that in the past you might be looking to make adjustments on from a labor and productivity standpoint, right? So you have to adjust your plans to deal with the variances and how different elements of your delivery operation perform. And AI and machine learning is one way of collecting all these inputs in a pretty efficient way, actually, and crunching those numbers down so that you can spin them back into the plan and have the plan adapt to reality, and maybe a little less of reality adapting to the plan.
Yeah, a couple of great points there. I mean, we often think about, and I know, when I think about last mile, final mile, when I think about, there's the optimization piece, right? And that's a critical component to doing this more efficient, particularly as you're getting more into a more dynamic, type of environment. But you brought up the piece about visibility and data, and being able to, from a customer standpoint, provide them with that visibility and things like ETAs and updates and so forth. And so that's the marriage of those two things, kind of the visibility with the optimization, is something that's been happening for some time, but I think it's become, almost it's a must have for those two things to go together, right?
It is, and I think most businesses are trying to increase their level of digital engagement with customers, right? Even traditional businesses, right? They want to increase their level of digital engagement with their customers. And a part of that in final mile logistics is providing that customer complete transparency on what they ordered, when they expect it to be there, how we're doing. In some cases, the ability to adjust those orders before the truck even arrives. And part of that is not in the realm of the delivery solution per se, but the combination of the delivery solution and other order management solutions. And another element of this that I think is really, there's some innovations that have taken place around it, and there's, I think, growing interest, is it's a team sport when you're dealing with customers and customer support. And the sales team, like all these businesses, it was on the commercial have account owners. And historically, there's always been a lot of friction between sales and logistics, right? And there's been some innovations in the market to provide more tools to allow them to stay on the same page between sales, merchandising, logistics, the support team, and the customer. So they're all looking at information that comes from the same freshly updated sources based on road truth, so to speak.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, the collaboration, the communication collaboration between all those different stakeholders internally and linking it to the customer is, certainly important. So Ken, as we're wrapping up here, what's next in food logistics? I mean, what's going to enable the next wave of business benefits in the industry?
Well, I think we're still relatively early on some of the things that I was mentioning a moment ago on the move to more dynamic and customer centric delivery choices, right? I think there's some room to run in this space. I think there's still room to run around some of the machine learning technologies and the analytics, and further automating some of the, a lot of this is in the realm of gathering the data, crunching it, and then a human still in the loop to make those analysis and choices. And I think the industry, all of us, the buyers as well as the technology providers, we got a little ways to go to get comfortable around letting the machine handle more and more of the application of some of those learnings in certain cases, right? Because you got to be careful, garbage in, garbage out to machine learning models as well, right? So you got to gain some trust and track record there, and it's actually going quite well, I'd say, from our perspective, but it's going to be something that unfolds over time there, and that hybrid delivery model that we talked about a little bit earlier on, allowing some choices between fixed and scheduled deliveries and things like that is going to continue to unfold. And I would say maybe the last thing where I see that there's going to be, I think, a good bit of innovation to come is particularly on the B2C side of food logistics and final mile. I think you're going to see some more growth in the platforms that kind of embrace the third-party delivery providers into the overall planning and visibility funnel, right? There's still some air gaps there that probably need to get cleared out in the technology chain of technology that exists in putting those things together.
Well, I mean, kind of my key takeaways are, it's become much more dynamic, right? So the need to have, align the technology to enable this more dynamic environment, the people, the processes really aligning along the same lines as well. I think it's becoming, important. And there's still room to grow and room to innovate, in this industry. And I'm sure we'll see that in the months and years ahead. And, that might be a good excuse to get you back in the program, Ken, maybe a year from now, or if not sooner, to kind of see the progress that the industry has made in these areas.
Always ready to take your invite, Adrian.
Great. Well, Ken, as always, thank you very much for making the time to be with us and sharing, some great insights and advice on this topic.
All right. Talk to you soon. Take
Great.
care.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Descartes website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Ken, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.